Everyone, Joe Waxman here, and happy 4th of July. In this video, I want to talk about the Ascendant. So let's jump right into it. Like, subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. You know what to do. All right, on here I have the clock. As you can see, it's 8:09:20 a.m. in Philadelphia. Sun has just risen, obviously, light out. And so we're looking at the Ascendant. The Ascendant's in Leo. I'm not going to address this from a very scientific perspective or highly intellectual or with graphs talking about the astronomy of it or anything like that. This is more understanding the meaning or the essence of the Ascendant. So what the Ascendant represents is it represents the Earth itself, the spin of the Earth. We have the sun, the moon, and the Earth as the big three. They're called the big three: the sun, the moon, and the Earth. Sun, the moon, and the Ascendant. And why the Ascendant is the Earth? Because it relates to the spin of the Earth, and it's the only point on the whole chart. In fact, the wheel itself relates to the spin of the Earth. As well as the planets in their relative orbital flow across the plane of the sun, the path of the sun, the ecliptic, as it's called. So the Ascendant represents the Earth, and we live on the Earth, and it's important to distinguish when we're talking about the sun, moon, the Ascendant. The sun is the center of the solar system, so all the planets revolve around the sun. So it's not to diminish the sun, but everything gets filtered through the sun. But the most personal point is the Ascendant, because that relates to our home, the Earth, and where we live, where we were born, where we will live our whole life. And subjectively, the Earth is always present. The sun rises in the morning and culminates in midday and around noon, and then sets in the evening, right? And for half the time, the sun is gone. So subjectively, the sun isn't even around half the time. Moon also waxes and wanes, and even still, it's only around half the time. We don't really get much. I mean, you can see the moon sometimes in the daytime, but that's dominated by the sun. At nighttime, the moon is sometimes present, sometimes not present, right? The Ascendant, the Earth, is always ever present. That's important to recognize, because there's some schizophrenia or dichotomy in the astrological community about what the Ascendant really is. On the one hand, you find it all too common for people to say the Ascendant is the mask that we wear into society or whatever, like how we appear to people, friends, family, the world, and whatnot. And then the other side, they want to take the Ascendant Lord, which here would be the sun, and call it the chart ruler, right? And it's neither the chart ruler nor is the Ascendant the mask. They're both wrong. Like, I don't want to beat around the bush. It's not a mask. I know, I get that it appears like a mask because the Ascendant relates to the body and the face, so there is a certain level where it can be mask-like. However, it's much deeper than a mask because of its, first of all, the Ascendant will change signs every 2.5 hours. So when we are born, we have a 2.5 hour window that we can choose our rising sign. And why that's significant is because that's like the fine tuning, the fine calibration for the soul, right? The spirit might be like, okay, rough picture, loose picture. I want to be born in the summertime when the sun is in, Gemini or Cancer or Leo, whatever. And the moon takes, I think, 2.5 days to traverse a sign. So then we have 2.5 days, to pick out the moon sign and You know, there's a very large window for all the other planets and signs, generally speaking. 2.5 hours for the ascendant. So the soul has to get really, really narrow. Like it has to be very specific about what it wants, why it wants that. And so that is the most personal representation of the soul that we have, right? Because the soul is very specifically, for instance, Pluto. You know, let's say somebody wants to be born within a certain time frame. They might not even have a choice about their Pluto sign. It's like you get no choice at all, buddy. You want to be born anytime in the next 20, 30 years, you're gonna be, you know, for the next, you know, let's say it's Pluto's in Aquarius. That's gonna be I think it's a 20-year transit. 20 years. So there's really no choice. Like if we were talking about incarnating, okay, like 20-year period, souls want to come in. Well, you don't have a choice about your Pluto, and you probably don't have much of a choice about your Neptune, and you probably don't have much of a choice about your Uranus. And there's not going to be a whole lot of choice about your Saturn or Jupiter. You're going to get some choice about Mars, Sun, Mercury, Venus, but it's not a whole lot, you know, depending on what time of year. We're getting narrower and narrower. And then you know, moon sign, a whole lot more choice. Then the most choice comes from the ascendant, because every 2.5 hours, right? And this is esoteric, right? I'm not, you know, you could argue that the soul doesn't have any choice and it's just all by chance. I don't believe that, right? I believe we choose. And from that perspective, that's where I'm coming from, right? The soul, this is all a spiritual lesson. That's what astrology is to me, right? It's the karma that our soul needs to process in this life, held by the planets in the positions that they're in, the quality of energy, and then that comes back for us based on when we choose to be born, right? So it's very important for the soul to choose the right timing, and it has the most choice with the ascendant. So the ascendant is really these souls' most precise, accurate representation of itself in this lifetime. That's why in esoteric astrology, the soul represents the self, or the ascendant represents the self, the soul, right? It is the most representative of the self. And so therefore, it cannot just be a mask. If it is the soul's choosing, it was the soul's specific choice of the sign to represent itself in this life, it is not a mask. It might appear like a mask, but it's not. It's much more than that. At the same time, we base the whole chart on the ascendant, right? We say, okay, the sun is in the 12th house from the ascendant. It's not that we're not saying like you know, like Jupiter here in the 10th house is in the 10th from the sun, although we could, and we'll look at that, or the 10th from the moon. It's not, it's the 10th from the ascendant. The whole chart is based on the point of the ascendant. So how could all that be if the ascendant is just a mask, right? If it's diminished to, it's actually the most important point in the chart, not the most, you know, not the way it's portrayed in pop astrology, which is the least important. It's a mask. You know, they want to relegate it to being just a Halloween mask, right? That's stupid. It's ridiculously stupid. So anytime you hear somebody talking about the ascendant as a mask, they don't know what they're talking about as far as astrology is concerned, because this is a major point that they haven't even considered. So just write them off. Let's just quickly write them off. Okay, maybe you're not as harsh as me. Maybe you want to be all soft and be like, oh, give them a chance. Maybe they know something. They don't know the basics. They don't have the foundation, you know, understanding to really to penetrate astrology. They haven't, or they're new, or they haven't given it much thought. In any case, this is major red flag if somebody calls the ascendant a mask. Huge red flag. That's like astrology crime. You're an astrology criminal if you say the ascendant is the mask, right? So secondly, then the other people take it way too far and they say it's the chart ruler. And these are parrots, because I've heard it so many times. Like nobody's really thinking, they've heard it represent, they've heard other people say it, so they're saying it, and they're just parroting. They're parrots. That's the level of evolution they're at. They're at the stage of parrot, where they just go around repeating. I'm being facetious, of course, not actually, but I'm exaggerating, as Geminis tend to do. But yeah, this parroting nonsense about the Ascendant Lord, which is what it actually is. And the reason why it matters is because each house has its own Lord. We talk about the Ascendant Lord, second house Lord, third house Lord, fourth house Lord. And these are all just directly, we're not giving fancy titles to them. We're not calling the third house Lord the mind's Lord, the Lord of the intellect, right? That's stupid, right? Or the fifth house Lord, the children's Lord, or the Lord of creativity. It's like nonsense. Like, why? Why would you do that? Why make yourself such a fucking idiot? Like, get a grip, people. It's not the chart rule. It doesn't rule the chart, right? It rules this. It's the Ascendant Lord. It's the dispositor of the Ascendant, right? It's not ruling over everything. It's not ruling over Neptune and Saturn and the Moon and Pluto and the fifth house and the fourth house. It's ruling. It's doing what it does, which is representing the Ascendant. And that's all it's. So just call it what it is, right? Instead of giving it this fancy title that, at the one hand, is just a polar opposite of the other idiot saying that the Ascendant is just a mask, when it's the defining point for the whole damn chart, right? We don't have any houses without the Ascendant. Okay. So to summarize, basically, the Ascendant, it represents the spin of the Earth, therefore it represents the Earth. We can't have an actual representative of the Earth, because the center of the Earth will be the center of the chart, right? And therefore it's not occupying any position. I know that there's some who said it's opposite the sun, but I don't buy that. I tried it out for a while. It doesn't really add up to me. We have the spin of the Earth. That's the particular angle, right, that we can get at, where the eastern horizon, this is where the eastern horizon meets the ecliptic. Okay, and that's as sciencey as you're going to get me to get in this. Okay. And being that it's the tilt of the Earth, the spin of the Earth is ever present. So while the sun is gone, the moon may or may not show up, depending on how fickle it is, or to what degree, right? The Earth is always constant, solid, always here. It's our home. This is our home. This is our self, right? The Ascendant represents the self. Ascendant Lord, in this case, happens to be the sun, represents the planetary ruler of the self. So it's equal. It's not the chart ruler. It's just the Ascendant Lord. That's actually what it is. The chart ruler is giving it all sorts of associations that don't necessarily apply to it. Doesn't rule the whole chart. Rules the Ascendant, and the Ascendant defines the houses, along with the midheaven. So notice how we measure things from the Ascendant, right? Mars and Venus are conjunct in Leo in the first house. South node is in Scorpio, third quadrant, but basically conjuncting the fourth house cusp, the IC, right? We're measuring it from the Ascendant. Now, if the Ascendant was so unimportant, why would we measure everything from the Ascendant? We don't measure things from the sun. We're not saying, although you can and you should, if you really want to go deep and understand astrology more fully, things from the sun. From the sun, Mars and Venus would be second, right? And then Mars would be dignifying, not quite by degree, because it's a little far out, but still there's some dignity. Well, I guess 12th is very minimal. This would be better if it was like sextile by degree. Any case, we see that there's a sesquisquare or semi-square here. So there's some aspect, right? There's always some aspect. People try and say there's no aspect between these planets. It's not exactly accurate. Every single degree between planets is an aspect. It's just whether it's more harmonious, less harmonious. It's like radio stations where you're getting a stronger signal or a weaker signal. All right. But we can't say Mars and Venus are second from the sun. So that's important. They're actually giving voice to the sun, right? And we can look at the rulers from the sun. So like moon is the ruler, it's opposite. Moon's in a pretty negative dignity here. It's both it's in Capricorn, so it's opposite its rulership, it's in detriment, and it's conjunct Pluto. So it's in bad shape right now. Non-expressive, but also very turbulent at the same time. So deep inner kind of struggle, you could say. But moon is in seventh from the sun, because if we're taking it as a sun chart, then 12 degrees Capricorn would be the opposition ascendant, and then moon and Pluto are in seventh from the sun. So that's a relational aspect. And that's why when I was talking about the aspects, when they say like oppositions are Saturnian, that's just stupid. I'm sorry to be harsh or blunt, but it's like it's just literal. Like if we look at the ascendant, well, opposite from the descendant, seventh house, right? We don't say this is Saturnian, even though Saturn does well in Libra, this opposition here is not Saturnian in nature. It is Libran in nature, which is Venusian in nature. Oppositions are always bring about the Libran archetype because of that. So Venus, Libra, right? Relationships. Right. So that's how the we get the aspects, the nature of the aspects. Any case. This is not Saturnian, this is Venusian, right? This opposition. Any case. We can also measure from the moon, right? Because the moon is a very personal planet. It's the second quickest planet, and it is very personal. It represents our mother, our home life, our early life, our childhood, right? Our heart, our emotions, our nurturing. So it's very important as well. Moon Pluto, not such a good thing. Not so easy. I shouldn't say not so good, because I actually know somebody who has Moon Pluto. Not easy, very difficult, but can create karmically, spiritually, great, profound lessons as far as karmic spiritual development, because it's like it's your heart. It's so deep. And then you got Pluto there. It's like this deep, 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 transformative, painful, planet that causes intense desire, transformation, catalytic urges, all kinds of really, really deep transformative stuff. Not peaceful, not easy, but very, very powerful. All right. Potentially destructive, depends on who it is, right? Some people might have this and become really criminal, or deeply destructive with drugs, alcohol, sex. Who knows? It could take so many different forms. Other person could become like a real like spiritual seeker or monk or something like that. All right. Any case, we can look from the moon to understand the moon better, and and if you want to do this in like a real simple way, you could just move the chart to where they're like we want to. Okay, now we want a sun chart, so we're doing it like this, right? So we have so obviously, so don't worry about you'd have to use whole sign house, right? For this, because that's based on if the ascendant were at this point, but we're just looking at the sun in relation to these planets. More ideally, you'd use the quadrants that are already there defined by the ascendant, but just real simply, we can look at whole sign houses. So Mars, Venus are second from the sun. And again, don't get confused by the quadrants here, because I just moved it forward just to understand it. So Leo is the second sign from Cancer, right? So Mars, Venus will be, this is a sun chart. Mars, Venus are second from the sun. South node, this would be in the fifth from the sun. Seventh, right? Ninth, 10th. Oh, this is still ninth sign. 10th, right? 11th. So you get it. And we can draw those relationships. It still has a similar meaning that it would from the ascendant, but it's more related to our sun sign, which means that this is our worldly connection, our daytime connection, if you will, our connection to the world as far as being a sun sign, whatever your sun sign is, and how that shows up, right? The sun is who we are in relation to the world, and it is very dominant, don't get me wrong, right? The sun is the center of the solar system. The moon would be, we can make a moon chart, and this is our how we how our heart is set up, how our emotions are, how we relate to the world on an emotional moon-based level, right? And so Saturn's in the second, Neptune, and then Chiron in the third, North Node Jupiter, Uranus in the fourth, and we can look at it that way, and we can get insight into the nature of our moon, right? And all this is to say, all this is just to put it into context that the ascendant is so important that that's what we put as the at the chart, at the point of the chart for everything, right? This is the basis for the whole entire chart, the ascendant point, the rising sign. We don't make a sun chart and base everything off of that. Where's the ascendant based on the sun chart, right? That would be so let's say, okay, ascendant 16 degrees Leo. We don't say our ascendant at 16 degrees Leo is in the second house from the sun, right? That doesn't make any sense. The sun is in the 12th from the ascendant. The ascendant is not in the second from the sun. So the ascendant is more central than the sun. It's more personal. It's more self-oriented, even than the moon. But we can measure things from the sun and the moon as well, and that's important to do. Let me just bring up my chart as an example. All right. So one thing I like to do is, you look at the sun, obviously the ascendant, everything's in relation to the ascendant. But if you want to get a better understanding of the sun and the moon, you look at the sun, you look at its position, but then you look at the ruler. Like in my case, Mercury, right? Mercury is in the 12th from the sun. So the 12th, that's going to be, for a Gemini, that's going to be a much more internalized Gemini. It's going to be a much more esoteric, energetic type of Gemini. A more Gemini is going to be Mercury in the second, or a strong second house, Cancer, right? Because then they're going to have the voice. The third house also, second and third. So I have the third house, I have the expression, but I'm missing Cancerian energy for the real flow. That's why it's like sometimes it doesn't flow properly. Also because Mercury. So Mercury does represent the expression. So the 12th house is very good for thinking. It's it's going to be very bright because now it's going into like very deep places, mysterious, esoteric, energetic, but it's not coming out well, right? As well as it could, right? For moon, now moon, actually this is pretty good for my moon because its ruler Mercury is in the 9th from the moon and trinal, right? If we put this on the ascendant, just to sort of understand what I'm talking about here, we could see Mercury in the 9th, right? Moon Lord in the 9th. So that's philosophical. So what this would represent is that my Virgo moon can express philosophical quality, a higher mindedness, spiritual, philosophical, plus Jupiter's there, right? We go back. We could see that, okay, so it's a spiritual, philosophical, but and then moon is in the 11th, so it's carrying out like a moon itself is concerned with 11th house matters, which are groups, networks, social, political structures, worldliness, right? That's one of the things about 11th house. It can be very small in small groups, small networks, but very big ones as well. So like politics, social. So it can express. So the Mercury then it becomes very philosophical about or high-minded about social political things. So you can say that. Or 12th from the sun in the eighth. Eighth is speaking about deep secrets, occult knowledge, esotericism. But then its dispositor is in the 12th, which is also a water aspect, water relationship, right? Water house. So it's going even deeper into the esoteric mysteries and stuff like that. So that's how to take it, even deeper into interpretation, right? So we could say, okay, sun to moon. So the ascendant lord is sun. That's in the 12th. So we're getting hidden quality, deep, subconscious, creativity, all the 12th houses associations. And then the moon is in the 7th. From that, it's in the 6th from the ascendant, but 7th from the sun. So we're getting a need for relationships here with it's dispositor of the moon. So we got a sun with the flow is ascendant, sun, moon, and those are the big three, which is interesting. So there's going to be a relationship, a concern for a relationship for others, along with Pluto and Mercury, and creativity and esoteric hidden subconscious quality. And this is, moon in Capricorn. It's not going to be very expressive, but moon in Capricorn with a 7th relationship shows healing of others who are sick, right? So this could be like a good time to pay attention to. I mean, obviously, this is happening. This is going to, moon as a transit is very quick. But I'm just trying to convey how you would interpret, this chart if it were natal. We can just pull up one more example. Let's look up Walt Whitman. All right, ascendant. All right. Hold on, I do have to pause it for 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. All right, so if we're looking at Walt Whitman, then we can see he has an Aries ascendant, and then Mars is in Aries. So Mars is in the 1st house. So Mars is its own dispositor. So that's probably not the best idea, but best example of that. But anyway, okay, so Sun's in Gemini, Mercury. So that's similar to me. And then so Mercury's in the 12th from the Sun. So, and he has no Cancer either. So maybe my philosophy about that is wrong. Well, he's not a speaker. He is a writer, and he does have Sun in the 3rd house. So not quite. He has Moon in Leo. Let me look up a different example. Let's look at Ann Wilson. Another Gemini. She's too similar to me. Maybe that's why I like her so much. Okay, hold on. Let's look up George Washington for some reason. All right. George Washington has a Taurus ascendant. So we look to Venus. Venus is in Pisces. And then Sun. Sun's in Pisces as well. So we look to Jupiter. Jupiter is in Libra. So what's the relationship here? So eighth. So Jupiter is in the eighth house from the sun. So that's a place of power and authority and domination and control, which is pretty interesting. Then we can look to the moon. Moon's in Capricorn. Moon and Capricorn are notoriously unexpressive, but they can be quite good leaders and very responsible. Right. So then we look to Saturn, and Saturn's in Aries. Interesting. The Saturn in Aries is not great dignity, but that is it's a fourth house relationship, but we're just talking about whole sign, right? You could say third because it's below the degree. You want to do equal house degree, like 16 degrees, 16 degrees, 16 degrees is below 16 degrees. But third, fourth. So what I'm trying to point to is that these are the lords of each of them. So like the ascendant lord is Venus. The sun's lord or dispositor, if we were to make a sun chart, that would be Jupiter. You could include Neptune as well, Neptune and Gemini. So that would be eighth house and fourth house. So very watery dispositors. So Neptune's already watery. So something very deep and powerful about the sun. Very not only is it in Pisces, but its dispositors are in water houses away from the sun. And then if we look at the moon, then the moon's in Capricorn, the opposite of water. It's very restricted. And then its ruler, Saturn in Aries, is kind of a dictator. So Saturn in Aries is very forceful and harsh. Not the most balanced Saturn, right? Saturn in Libra is considered very balanced, harmonious, exalted, right? Saturn in Aries is debilitated. Aries is a little too selfish for Saturn. But in any case, this will be another fourth house relationship, or the third, you could say third, fourth. So interesting. And fourth house for a politician is very important because that's homeland, right? Fighting for the homeland. So there is some of that relationship going on here, right? We don't have much in the actually Moon is the fourth house ruler, and Saturn being the dispositor, having a fourth house relationship, it's quite good. Venus in the 11th house for exalted Venus in the 11th house for being very social minded, politically minded, thinking about the big community as a whole. That's also quite good. Right. So that was just a quick example, and that wraps up the talk on the ascendant. I hope that clarifies some things. Just to summarize, the ascendant is the most personal point in the chart, and we measure everything from the ascendant. The ascendant lord is not the chart ruler. It literally only represents the ascendant, and every planet represents, a different house or sign. And yeah, the ascendant is not the mask. It's much, much deeper than the mask. It is essentially the self. And we can use the sun and the moon and every planet. In fact, we can look at it through, if you want to understand every planet, then you look at itself and its ruler, right? So if we want to understand Saturn, we look to Mars. Mars is in Scorpio in the 7th from the ascendant. But from Saturn, it is in the 8th, right? 8th whole sign house. 7th would be Libra, 8th. So that's a very powerful position for Mars. Mars is very strong in Scorpio. and in the 7th shows that he really, you don't want to be his enemy because of his ability to be very fierce and strategic. And then Pluto in the 6th conjunct Jupiter, so he has very philosophical. His philosophy is becoming very Plutonian, which is Plutonic, which is very meaning strategic and very penetrating and deep. And in the 6th house, that's like mundane and regular. It's his job to be a strategist, right? Yeah. So like you can see the ruler of each sign of each planet and understand something about that. Mercury, you look to Mercury and say, okay, Saturn, it's ruled by Saturn, and then Saturn is in the 3rd from Mercury. So that suggests that there's some kind of intellectual or communicative quality to this Mercury. Mercury's at the, in the 10th house, culminating from the ascendant. So you got to try and put these pieces together to build a puzzle, to understand, the full nature of somebody. And it's not necessarily easy, but you're going to get a much more complete picture if you do, right? If you want to understand the Venus, then you look to Jupiter. And Jupiter is in the 7th, but essentially in the 6th quadrant, 6th, 7th whole sign, 6th quadrant from Venus. It's in Libra, sexual mutual reception, because they're in each other's houses. So that's quite strong for Venus, right? Because Venus is already exalted here. Jupiter in Libra is okay, but and then there's some very strong relational nature to this Venus. This Venus really wants relationships because its ruler, Jupiter, is in Libra and in the 6th, 7th house. Even 6th house is still a relational house. See how they're pretty much opposite. So there's going to be some healthy relationships here with this. Venus is ruling the 6th house and the ascendant. Venus is the ascendant lord. So and what was his wife? Martha Washington? Is that right? I don't know. Any case, we can see that there's going to be some good relationships because of this. Mars and Scorpio. Mars is also dignity here, so very strong woman, and there could be more than one, and each one would be represented by different things. We have very different relationships. So if you have something on the ascendant lords doing something else, and then you have some oppositions, those will play out into different relationships at different times, especially if they're interpreted differently. So any case, we can keep going, but I think I just wanted to address this point about the ascendant and then how to look at all the planets with respect to the importance of the ascendant. The ascendant is so important that we put it at the Aries points. This is the Aries points, and we measure everything from it. But we can put every planet at the Aries point, especially ascendant lord, sun, and moon, to understand the nature of them better. But we can put anything at the Aries point and understand it from there. 1st house, 2nd house, 3rd house, and we'll get a better understanding of that planet. All right, that's it for now, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Very hot out. Happy 4th of July. Be mindful of safety. Don't lose your fingers. I don't know. I guess, be careful. I don't want to be a parent or anything like that, but I am a parent, but whatever. I don't want to be your parent. Anyway, stay safe. I'll see you soon. All right, bye.